Hi, this is Jahara. Welcome back to another episode of In the Line of Wire. And today I have with me Farzal. Hi, Farzal.
Hi, Jahan.
Farzal works for Amana, but we're not going to be talking about Amana at all. We're going to talk about holistic things since we started on that this morning. Tell us, Farzal, first of all, a little about yourself. Where did you go to school, college? When did you come back? Why did you come back?
Okay.
Not that we're complaining.
My education in Pakistan was in Karachi. Adamji Science College is where I did my intermediate from.
Wow.
It was on the street that I lived on, so a very short walk.
Okay.
My high school was also on the same street. So
Lucky you, I had to travel in buses to get to my academic institution.
So I was very green friendly, I guess, walking back and forth. But then when it was time to go to university, I wanted to go abroad. My father was educated in the US back in the 60s, so he obviously would not have allowed me to even study in Pakistan. I went to UT Austin, started in electrical engineering.
Okay.
Did that for about a year, did my first internship after the freshman year at Motorola, and realized engineering was not something I wanted to do. And I bring this up because some of the students might be watching it and they may feel that once they make a decision, they can't go back.
Oh, that has happened quite a few times. They do all 4 years before they say, okay, now we can get out of it.
Yeah, so it's not like marriage.
Well, even marriage people get out of, so yeah.
So I realized that's not really what I wanted to do. I mean, I was good at it. I had a 4.0 GPA, freshman year internship at Motorola was.
But it didn't excite you.
But it wasn't exciting in the long term. So I came back, spent a semester taking one engineering course, but exploring more on computer science, economics, business, and I realized economics and computer science excited me as a mix, not as separate subjects.
Okay, people never think of economics and computer science as a mix.
Actually, it's a very popular dual major in the US.
Okay.
It keeps you on the business side of IT or the IT side of business, either way.
Okay.
So by the time I finished my third semester, I realized that's what I wanted to do, and I enrolled in both the programs. And I still finished in 4 years, alhamdulillah, with a dual bachelor's in economics and computer science. This was 2002. Jobs were very difficult to come by. Very experienced resources were unemployed in the industry. But due to internship experiences, and this is again something which the students need to be careful about, your internship experiences can get you a full-time job even in worst of the economies. So at Merrill Lynch was one of the companies where I had interned, and that's where I went for my full-time job as well.
Okay.
And
how long were the internships? Just
internships there are typically between 10 to 14 weeks.
Yeah, so that's what, here it's like 4 weeks or
4 and 6 weeks is not something
that you get clerical work rather than anything else. Make the coffee.
Yeah, your managers are not really motivated to invest in you if you're coming for 4 weeks. And they're, just like yahan pe, what do you call it, the MT program, management trainee programs, they have good programs for internships as well. So it's a structured internship where there is a close collaboration. I think even during the internship on a weekly basis, we had a closed loop session with the senior executives of Merrill Lynch, for example. So they start, I guess in some senses, brainwashing us.
Grooming you is what they would say.
Right during the internships. Anyway, so that helped in getting a full-time job even in the worst of economies. I had an offer from Motorola as well, where I had interned. But Motorola would have been a very engineering focused role, so I went to Merrill Lynch. This was a very exciting time to go to a financial institution, especially in the area of regulation, because right after 9/11 a lot of new financial legislations had passed, anti-money laundering, know your client, and in addition the separation of investment advisory from consulting, because after the Arthur Andersen and Enron scandals.
Correct.
So a lot of new regulation had just been passed by the Congress, and financial systems had to be overhauled. So
probably something which is about to happen now as well. With this global crisis, a lot more.
Well, this is more of a greed factor, so I'm not sure technology can help there.
Okay.
But there was a clear need for evaluating your clients a lot more closely from anti-money laundering perspective. So that was a great time. You could have gone into technology and done maintenance work, but these new regulations allowed our class to do some really groundbreaking stuff in terms of really high throughput data modeling systems, combining a lot of data that was in isolated systems to bring more intelligence to the front end. So that was my area of focus at Merrill Lynch for the 2 years that I spent there. During those 2 years, I also did my MS from NYU. It was a part-time MS. I took 3 classes a semester and just finished it in 18 months.
And did companies in the US actually encourage you to do your
masters? Yeah, they have co-sharing arrangements where they pay a part of your tuition. I think Merrill paid about 50% of my MS tuition with no sort of bond signing. You will work at Merrill for X years after you finish.
Technology companies here are beginning to do that, and that's great to see.
Yeah, I mean here it's okay, I guess, to get a bond signed.
No, not bonds. I'm talking about paying partly for your tuition if you're doing your masters or if you're going in for a PhD program. So that's good to see you. That means we're maturing as an industry.
Right, and as a percentage of your overall compensation, I guess. In Pakistan, education is comparatively cheaper and the salaries are also lower in terms of dollar terms. So I guess in percentage terms, it's not really that big a deal if companies start sponsoring. MBA programs in the US typically come with a commitment to work at the company because they're a lot more expensive than science masters. So did that. After Merrill, I moved to Bearing Point in the US. It was called KPMG Consulting.
Yeah.
And I was there in the financial services insurance, did 2 projects with AIG and MetLife, and then I moved back to Pakistan.
Okay, and what is the experience of moving back to Pakistan?
Actually, the few weeks of moving back were probably the most interesting. Just the other day, my wife was packing up all the clothes of my 1-year-old, which were not going to be used until we have the next baby, and she packed all of them in one suitcase, and that's really the suitcase that I brought to Pakistan when I moved back 4.5 years ago, and she was surprised, you moved back with such a small suitcase, it could only fit a 1-year-old clothes. So I came here on vacation. Most people don't know that. I had prepared for moving back.
This is a scoop.
Yeah, and I hope my managers in the US never get to see this. But I was here on vacation. I had a few interviews lined up, and mashallah, within a week, 10 days, I had 4 offers. Financial services में 2 थी, software export industry में 1 थी, and one was a very unusual tracking company wanting to launch an insurance service, which was Tracker Direct Insurance.
Right.
So I chose that role, and I was doing a project for Bearing Point where my team was in India. So I continued to do that from Pakistan until that project finished, and then
So you didn't leave them in the lurch, which is a good thing for any employee to do. You shouldn't leave the company that you're leaving in the lurch.
I mean, in the US, you get these ethics from day one, so it was not no-brainer. I never went back to the US, so I came here on vacation with my 2 suitcases, and then never went my furniture, my home, rented home, God knows what else. I just left it there.
Okay. I think there couldn't have been, crystal or very expensive stuff that you left there, or did one of your friends pick it up?
I was one of the few Pakistanis who actually bought a bed to sleep on, so I wasn't sleeping on the floor, but no jewels or antiques there.
Right.
My very, very favorite red cordless phone got left there. So I bought another replica here.
Okay, that's all right then.
So I moved here basically because the economy looked really good. This was late 2004.
It was good.
Musharraf, Shaukat Aziz, Ishrat Hussain, basically the dream team, right? A lot of investment was happening in pretty much all sectors. Mm-hmm. So the experience of moving back was actually pretty good. Okay. There was a lot of opportunity available. Like I said, within a week there were 4 offers. All were very close to 6-figure when I was only 25 years old. Very senior level roles, so a lot of responsibility and expectations as well.
Mm-hmm. And so you stayed with TDI for how long?
TDI
was a short.
Well, not so short. So it was actually the longest employment that I've had in the US. So it was about 18 months. Not long enough, but But our work was pretty much done in 6. So I launched the insurance company in about 6 months.
Right.
From writing the whole software, setting up the call center, designing their operational manuals, so on and so forth. So what we did is something called Geico.com in the US, where the whole insurance concept is online or over the phone.
Right.
And there is a similar direct line.co.uk insurance company in the UK. And we basically wanted to bring that philosophy to Pakistan. So when you called for insurance, you were not given a code.
Right.
Which was very weird for Pakistani consumers. मैं call कर रहा हूँ, मुझे code चाहिए. We can't give you a code because we are a risk-based insurance company.
Right.
We need to ask you about your personal life, about how you drive your car, what kind of car you drive, things like that, to come up with a risk profile for you.
Right.
And once we have come up with the risk profile, your rate could be as low as 3% or it could be as high as 7%.
Right.
And that was a very brave move on part of the CEO to say कि जी हमने यही करना है. And it was very difficult to translate that vision and that discipline down to the employees of the insurance companies, because they had worked in the industry without really, so they were in the risk management business
Without actually
understanding risk, except maybe for reinsurance. So
but how did you balance that with the privacy issue? I mean, asking people.
Well, we would install tracker in every car anyways, so we sort of would be able to validate a lot of things that you had answered. Privacy, as long as we are not giving that identifiable information out to third parties, I think we were okay. But at that time I wasn't thinking about it.
Okay. Well, you should.
So, well, when you install a tracker and you give a call center employee the right to know where you are at every moment, you've sort of given us the ownership of that data anyways.
Not ownership. You are sort of taking care of that information. Ownership means you could do with it what you want, right?
Yeah. So for risk profiling, another thing was that insurance company, we guaranteed all claims settled within an hour.
Yeah.
Now this is an industry which takes a few weeks to settle claims. The idea that your claim could be settled in minutes wasn't.
Does it actually happen?
It's still happening. So from our first claim to our first 1,000th claim, it's still within an hour for damage.
Okay.
And for theft, it's within a week rather than 3 months.
Okay.
Because we have installed a tracking device, we know the car is genuinely lost. There's no point waiting 3 months.
Right.
So we can do a lot of those. We were able to do a lot of those things which other insurance. And then my whole team went to Adamji and is trying to replicate that.
Okay. Terrific. Then
So
where did you go next?
I haven't had, so this goes back to the process. I haven't really settled down in Pakistan even after almost 5 years.
Okay.
I've done a few things. I've done software export thing with PicSense. I have done this Tracker Direct, so a very local services business, selling insurance online in Pakistan.
And now mobile commerce with Amana?
And now I'm in the mobile commerce thing. I've done my own bits as well. I've done a lot of consulting for search engine optimizations.
Okay.
Actually writing a search engine from scratch.
Wow.
For Arabic content, so very focused search engines, and we basically implemented a lot of the things that Google implemented in late 90s.
Right.
So we are 10 years late, but we are still solving the $1 billion problem.
Okay.
I've done a lot of work in the social networking space, developing niche social networks and applications,
Right.
And helping businesses promote themselves using the social networks.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of that, and now my focus is mostly in the mobile commerce, as well as teaching at IBA.
Okay. Now that we are on teaching, tell us a little about that experience of teaching at IBA, and generically, what is your opinion of how things are going as far as industry, academia, interaction is concerned?
So IBA is the oldest business school outside of North America, right? That's what they quote.
Okay, so that's the ad for IBA.
That's the ad. So it's again, a lot of my life is just driven by events rather than me making decisions, and that's a weakness, or that's a strength.
It could be a strength.
They say that the universe conspires if you really want something, and it could be the conspiracy of the universe.
I had heard about conspiracy theories, but this one takes the cake.
Well, the bounty at least.
Right. Okay.
So I actually applied for an MBA at IBA, which is, in retrospect, it's a pretty stupid thing. I mean, you did your MS from NYU. You took 6 courses from the top business school in the US, and you're applying for MBA. So I passed it, and I realized this was too childish. I mean, if anything, I should be going for a PhD in something. So I said I want to do PhD, and they said you'll have to do about 18 months of PhD courses or something like that, and I said screw it.
Yeah. This is a family show, You're using language that we normally don't allow.
Okay.
Right, Rabia?
Well, it's not live, so
No, we'll allow it. All right.
you can
So
do the
then-
South Park thing.
So you didn't do your PhD?
So I said, forget it. I'll just go and maybe teach there. So I talked to Saeed Ghani Saab, who is the
Head of computer science.
head of computer science, and been with IBA for the longest time.
Yes.
And we said, as soon as there is an opening, we'll see. My first course was object-oriented programming techniques, which was I was really good at it. I was the highest ranked faculty that semester, which was my first semester teaching, so that was a good accomplishment.
Yeah.
But I didn't really enjoy teaching computer science subject at IBA.
Okay.
So I requested for a more business IT combination course, and electronic commerce seemed to be a good course. So I've been teaching electronic commerce at IBA for the last 3 years now. It was an optional course, and from what I've known, it's become a lot more important just in general in the industry. The students have good feedback, and so they are probably going to make it a required course.
And you had a lot of visiting faculty who came in and did some of the...
Yeah, so some of the
Teaching.
new things that I've tried is bringing in guest lecturers for topics that I feel are best left to the experts.
Okay.
So for example, last semester we had Mr. Shakil come in from the Indus Hospital to talk about automation in his hospital specifically, but generally in healthcare.
Right.
We have had Noman Sheikh to talk about credit bureaus and data bureaus, and so on. So some very selective subjects for which guest lectures would make a lot more sense than.
And that kind of awareness is needed, because otherwise the sort of gap between what's happening in the industry and what's being taught at the university is too wide.
So it excites the students about certain topics that otherwise would sound too boring.
Yeah.
Now they see a real world director of technology or a CIO come in and talk about how they have done it, and excite the students a lot more than a regular faculty member can.
Right.
So that's one. Also, I think it goes the other way around. A lot of these guest lecturers have been able to keep in touch with the students and identify some of the better students to come to their companies for internships and full-time jobs.
So it works for both.
So it works both ways from that perspective. We also tried to bring this to the whole of IBA, at least for the computer science and MIS perspective. So what we wanted to do was asked faculty for request a guest lecturer for certain topics, and then we would circulate those requests within the industry, and then the industry could contact the faculty and set up these guest lectures.
Okay.
So we have tried to do that. Hasn't really
Taken off yet.
We haven't received much requests. So it's happening.
Maybe we need to do it sort of a different way.
We have. So some faculty members starting last semester actually took my lead, and they started calling the industry experts themselves. So Professor Sajjad, who teaches artificial intelligence, invited Jawad Fareed and Noman Sheikh and a couple of other individuals to talk about their specializations. So I think that will start on an individual basis first,
And then may get formalized.
and may not need to get formalized later on, right?
Yeah.
We've done seminars inviting students from different disciplines to talk. Badr was our first example from Google, where he came and talked about a subject which is a good mix of technology and marketing and business all at the same time.
Yeah.
So trying to do those initiatives to bring what is basically a cliche industry academia alliance, but that really lacks at even the top business school in Pakistan. I think LUMS and GIK are probably the only two places where it has a formal place. NUST is doing decently well these days, I've heard, in this area, but none of the Karachi universities are.
So at least it started, and hopefully it will move
Right.
ahead.
So the leadership has changed over the last year. That should help. A lot of initiatives have come from Dr. Ishrat. So
Now, is there any cross-disciplinary? Are there any cross-disciplinary things happening at the IBA, or anything that you think we should initiate? Because it's needed. You can't have people working in isolation.
So one of the things I think you had actually mentioned when we went to Dr. Isharat was collaboration between
The computer science and the business
computer science and business students. So taking the best from different universities and putting them together. So that did not happen in that way, but IBA did start doing internal business plan competitions starting last year.
Okay.
This was the second year of that committee. There were about 60 projects that we evaluated from the IBA students. We selected, I think, 5 or 10 teams to go and take part in the national competition at
And
LUMS.
they did rather well.
Yeah, in 2 categories. There were 2 categories. In one, our team came first. In the other, our team came second. So just in the second year, these students were able to demonstrate quite a high level of accomplishment at a national level.
Okay.
So that suggested that there was a good talent pool available which was not being fully utilized.
Right. Okay. Now, there's another area that is of interest to me, and I know to you, is the social utilization of ICT.
Yeah.
And shouldn't we be doing a lot more to make sure that technology is used for the betterment of the larger number of Pakistanis rather than only those in the large cities?
Yeah, I mean, not everyone can afford this very light, very sexy.
They don't have to. I mean, there is technology now available that is affordable.
It's pretty much free. I mean, a cell phone, once you buy it,
Yeah.
it's, how many people do we know now in labor class that don't have street addresses, that don't probably have shops,
But they have a
a
cell
mobile
phone.
number?
Yeah.
They advertise it on the back of their bicycle or their motorbike
Or rickshaws.
or rickshaws, and they get great amount of business through that.
Yeah.
So we have already seen really cheap technology delivered profitably by the telecom companies, helping the masses by bringing them into the mainstream, giving them an identity, giving them a communication tool, which inshallah soon would become a payment tool as well, to allow them to stay in touch with rest of the some areas where we have not been able to do very well using the same ICT technology. One is the whole crop selling experience of the farmers.
Right.
This is something that I'll be looking into over the next couple of years as to how that whole process can be optimized. So I asked my IBA students in the final exam, I always throw a couple of very weird questions that that are just totally nonsense as far as the students are concerned, but they're really important. And one of the questions was that, so there are hundreds of thousands, probably millions of small farmers in this country come up with an auction system that just helps them sell products better, and everybody just created another eBay. We'll go online, we'll set up an account, people will pay through credit cards.
Think beyond that.
And I just crossed the whole thing out. I said, just imagine this question was never there, and I gave everyone like 1 out of 10 or something like that.
Oh
for that
God, you're
question.
tough.
But the idea is that, so there's a big need, and when you ask somebody to solve the problem, they create an eBay. It's not going to work for the poor farmers to go online and set up a secure password and then accept credit card based payments. So we have to use the telephone technology. This is only the least common denominator, as we would probably say, right? It's ubiquitous, it's in everyone's pocket. Villages which don't have water supply, which don't have sewerage lines, electricity or gas, have telecom services available through generator powered towers, right? There is a cell phone in each village in Pakistan.
Definitely.
Right. ICT fund is doing to get broadband into a lot of regional.
Yeah, through USF.
Right.
Yeah.
So we will soon inshallah have that. So cell phone is already there, 2G is already there, basic GPRS is already there, SMS is there. How can we combine these different interfaces and the cell phone, which can be a payment device as well, to basically assist these people to sell their products at market competitive rates.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar has gone from 15 rupees per kg to 40 rupees per kg, but the cane prices have not gone up by 3 times. Farmers are not getting 3.
Right.
Same for wheat, for example. So
The farmer is not benefiting, the middleman is.
the middlemans are. So that's one area where I think technology needs to be used a lot more efficiently, and the only technology I could think that could solve that problem is the cell phone.
But there are kids who are thinking about this. We saw recently a plan that LUMS team had come up with on the use of technology to provide assistance to farmers or to make sure that land usage is more optimally used and that water resources are more optimally used. So I think technology has more of a role to play other than just in marketing.
Right.
But also in
Education.
streamlining processes in education, in making sure that our production of crops is more.
Yeah, so for example, we probably don't watch PTV anymore, right? But PTV shows these advertisements at the beginning of Kharif season, for example, कि अब पानी डालो, अब ये डालो, अब वो डालो, right? These things need to be broadcasted through the cell phone, which every farmer now has, right? Weather alerts, for example, these weather changes are expected, virus attacks, so these things.
And these can again be used for the health sector as well. This is the time for the polio vaccine or whatever else.
Right.
So I mean,
बच्चा पैदा होता है, आपने माँ बाप का मोबाइल नंबर रिकॉर्ड कर दिया, right? And then you can pretty much send them a vaccination alert along the line. Pamper companies have been able to do that.
But this is being done, by the way. This is being done. So by Indus Hospital and other NGOs who are working with them. So we heard about that when Shahida Salim was on the show earlier. And so there are, but we're not doing enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, like 10 kids are born every second. So I don't know.
Yes, we're good at that.
So and these SMSs are cheap. Everyone knows how to read them at least, if not send one. And if we could send, so health sector, farming, micro insurance. I mean, like 800,000 people in this country have private health insurance. A country of 160 million, less than 0.5% have health insurance.
And what about e-learning? I mean, learning for the masses.
Again, I mean, we have probably all read 3 cups of tea. And it's such a difficult process to set up a school. It's very difficult to get the teachers there, to build infrastructure. You have to build a bridge before you can build a school, and so on and so forth.
And all that can be done through technology.
And technology is there, it's satellite.
We're just not using it.
Yeah, so the army has it, the air force has it, we and you have it, and it's so much cheaper to deploy technology to solve these problems. So e-learning is another great area of very cheap delivery and all these services will become cheaper delivered through technology. So
exactly,
they'll help you produce more. They'll help
and better quality education as well, because you can't have the same quality of teachers everywhere across the country. And in fact, you can have teachers from outside of Pakistan as well. I mean, apart from the language barrier. Teaching kids through the cities at least.
And you can excite the students by showing them the world through these technologies, which they otherwise, I mean, there are people who really haven't gone beyond the 10-kilometer radius of their homes all their life, so they really don't know what the world looks like. And
also better understanding between people as well, because different cultures, how people live, there are so many similarities between people that don't come out. So I think all the world's problems can actually be solved by the utilization of technology. It's not the only thing that will solve it, but the usage of it.
Someone from I think the US military once said, if we had 50 Greg Monderson building schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan, we would not have had 9/11. Education is really the only way to solve the problem of the masses. So yeah, e-learning, because building schools is just too troublesome. Brick and mortar is too difficult. For example, banking in this country, banking is very brick and mortar business, right? You have to have a branch with fax machines and ATM machines and generator. And that's why banking has never reached beyond the 5% of the population. There are 1 million unique bank accounts, 10 million unique bank accounts in a country of 160 million. So that's 5% banking penetration, and the reason it hasn't gone beyond the 5%
is because of brick and mortar.
It's too expensive to do brick and mortar even for the financial industry. Look at the telecom, पान वाले के through card बेचते हैं 2.5 lakh, 250,000 people are selling their product now. Because you made it a lot easier, delivery channels are a lot more efficient.
So the same model needs to be applied to financial services.
Financial services, education, just alerts. I mean, it's amazing how the power of alerts, SMS alert at the right time.
But there are SMS alerts at the wrong time too. 2 a.m. for instance. We've all gone through
But
that.
you need to keep two phones for that. One works 9 to 5 is your private number, nobody knows. The other one is for public purposes. So I think that's something we have to. Nokia needs to give Pakistanis a good cell phone like a Nokia E61 with 2 SIMs in it, not the Trend Micro system.
Hey, I saw an iPhone,
Yeah.
a fake iPhone
Yeah.
that takes 2 SIMs.
So it's not an
And
iPhone.
both of them are, well, it's not a real iPhone, it's something that probably was developed in China or somewhere else. And it's smaller than the regular iPhone, it's 3G,
It's 3G.
and it takes 2 SIMs, both of which can be active at the
3G
same
is actually,
time.
the Chinese have a different standard of 3G now than the rest of the world, so I'm not sure. By the way.
3G it is. Well, I don't know it's from China, it could be from somewhere else, but it was available in Thailand, and I actually tried it, and it was pretty cool. You know, gadgets are my thing, so
So-
I need to try it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest learning lesson for me in the last 4 to 5 years in Pakistan has been that we say a lot, okay, banking has improved so much and this has, but really we haven't applied technology to solve the major problems of this country.
And this is not true just of Pakistan. I mean, it's true of India, it's true of any large country where technology needs to penetrate to the masses. And things need to be done to make that happen.
I mean, it's payments, which is my area of
Yeah.
research and focus these days. Is, I mean, Philippines has pretty much solved the problem of payments using mobile technology, which
Right.
they started in the early 90s. Kenya has completely solved this problem. Brazil has completely solved this problem. Nigeria is very close to solving this problem. These large Middle Eastern telecom companies like Zen and Etisalat, which are in 10, 15, 20, 25 countries in Middle East and Northern Africa, they have basically interconnected their systems, allowing payments through mobile phones between the countries. So a lot of the world has actually solved the payments problem, for example, or will be solving it in the next 3 to 5 years.
Are we going to follow suit?
So, and in Pakistan, we have a branchless banking regulation sitting on the desk, catching dust for the last 16 months now. None of the banks have done anything with branchless banking so far.
Why is that? Do you think they don't understand the concept, or is it just
What
this
we-
is something different, we don't know whether we want to risk it?
So
sort of?
innovation is the exception in Pakistan. It's not the norm, and we just don't see innovation around us. I mean, there are very few companies or individuals doing innovative work. Banking का इतना सुना था कि banking has improved, but you know, it really, we haven't done it. I mean, we are doing what Bank of America did 15 years ago by bringing online bill payments to the masses, not realizing that only 5% of the people actually have bank accounts. So we really haven't done much innovative work in this country. The earlier example of selling insurance over the phone or internet, it hasn't been replicated at all. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were able to give everybody an electronic loyalty card. They go to a workshop, they don't have to carry any paperwork for their insurance. They swipe the card at the POS, their insurance detail comes on the screen, and their claim is done. That we did 4 years ago. Nobody has even tried to copy that yet. Catch card आया है आदम जी का, I'm sure कि वो वही करने के लिए कह रहे हैं. But 4 years for Adam ji to catch up to a dinky insurance company that I was part of, it's just slow. So innovation is extremely slow in Pakistan.
Well, not in the IT sector. It's happening.
I beg to differ. I mean, IT company for IT itself, yes, but you know,
IT for customers within Pakistan is what you're talking, or IT for the masses is what you're talking.
right?
Because we're still developing for the export market.
Yeah,
rather than
we are
for the
still doing IT for the sake of IT, not for the sake of banking or insurance or weather, alerts or things like that. So we have 60 news channels. They all show pretty much the same thing. We have 5 cell phone carriers who are just reducing their permanent rate by 2 paisas every 3 months, and that's what they've been doing for the last 3 years, just fighting on the rates. Nobody has really brought on an innovative mobile-based service so far.
Well, maybe
Mobilink has 200 services. how many are you using except voice? So we just make a photocopy of things that we see around us, but we really don't tailor it to the Pakistani audiences. So a lot of innovation has to happen. So I think you asked me why hasn't that happened? The payments through mobile, and people are just not used to innovation. POS machines, for example, हर कोई लगा रहा है POS machine. This country has 1 million retailers. 10 लाख retailer हैं. The POS machine जिस पे कार्ड स्वाइप होता है 15,000 दुकानों पे लगे हुए हैं. Now the POS machine is not going to make payments electronic because it's only 1.5% of the overall retail base. Banking is overall 5% of the population. So these existing technologies are not going to solve the problem. We need to bring in something disruptive. Whereas the industry just focuses on sustaining technologies, थोड़ी improvement कर देंगे, नए delivery channel आ जाएगा हर 3 साल के बाद. When you want to go from 5% to 50%, sustaining technology doesn't work.
It has to be disruptive.
5 will take you to 6 to 7 to 8, but you can't go from 5 to 50. And disruptive technologies require a lot of risk taking, and it just hasn't happened in Pakistan.
Well, it will. If there are people like you, there will be more people who will sort of begin to think along these lines.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the money to launch a branchless banking enterprise myself.
Well, you should apply.
I just need $12 million, by the way, for some reason.
Okay, so if anybody out there has $12 million, please contact Farzal.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Farzal. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
That was Farzal, and we talked about a lot of subjects, and he's just taken a bounty that I had here for my
for
my guests. No, I did not have even one since this morning. I'll have you know I'm eating healthy, at least today. This is Jahara signing off from another episode of In the Line of Fire.